What's up guys, Nick here. Today I want to talk about the Sigma 18-35. Now this is going to be more of a video background review, it's not a photography review. I'm not a photographer, I really don't take that many pictures. I mainly do more video stuff, so that's what I'm going to be talking about with this lens. So the categories I'm going to cover is build quality, how this lens pairs with Canon's autofocus, the aperture and the image that this lens produces, and I'm also going to talk about some negatives that I personally have found while using this lens. So to start with the build quality, overall it's very solid. I mean, it is more of an expensive APS-C lens and it's made of what feels like a really high quality metal. It does seem durable, but since this is my first real expensive lens, I mean, I avoid any damage to this lens at all costs. The zoom ring is very smooth. It only takes about a quarter twist to go from 18 to 35 millimeters, and since it's so smooth, you'll get really nice smooth zooms when you're out shooting on the field, and it's not a difficult task by any means. And moving on to talking about the focus, the autofocus in this lens is a bit noisy. It kind of makes this clicking sound. But other than the noise, it works extremely well with Canon's dual pixel autofocus. You know, I can use the touch LCD screen, select what I want to focus on, and it does it very quick and smooth. And when using manual focus, there is plenty of travel, so that way you can get a really precise focus. And if you like to rack focus with all that travel, you can get a nice smooth racking of the focus. But that's something I never really use because, I mean, I have Canon's dual pixel autofocus. I mean, I do use it sometimes if I need to lock focus on a specific thing, but for the most part, I'm using this lens completely on autofocus, and it just works extremely well. So this lens does have an f1.8 aperture, but with that extremely fast aperture, that means this lens should be really good in low light. It lets tons of light onto the sensor, so that way you can have your right shutter speed and you don't have to crank your ISO too high. But on the contrary, if you are shooting outside, it's definitely recommended that you get an ND filter so that way you can use this lens to its fullest potential. I mean, I made a video about the $30 one I got off Amazon. I mean, it works. I mean, it's definitely not the best, and if you can afford it, definitely go for a more expensive ND filter. But inside here in my little set, I mean, I can comfortably have my ISO at 100, you know, without having to blare the light on me or anything like that, so that way I can get the cleanest image so I can shoot my log profile and not really have to worry about too much grain. When it came out around 7 years ago, it was actually the first lens of its kind, you know, a wide angle zoom lens that's very fast. And one quick thing to note with this lens, since it is an APS-C lens, you have to keep in mind the crop factor. So on this Canon camera, it's a 1.6 crop factor, so 18 times 1.6 is a 28 millimeter lens, and 35 times 1.6 is a 56 millimeter lens. So in reality, it's about a 28 to 56 millimeter lens. This is definitely not a vlogging lens. I mean, it's big, it's heavy, it's not the widest lens. I mean, right now I'm zoomed out all the way 18 millimeters. My arm is fully extended. This lens does have 9 aperture blades, so that means those autofocus elements, they're going to be nice rounded circles, they're not going to be jagged shapes or anything like that. It's going to look nice and organic, but the quality of those autofocus elements is so incredible. It just provides such an amazing look no matter what you're doing with it. And that leads us to the image. It's important to note that all these shots were shot on my Canon SL2 in CineStyle, either 60 frames a second or 24 frames a second, but mainly I use this lens for talking head stuff, you know, in the studio. It's my go-to lens for any B-roll stuff because I just love the look that this lens produces. Most of the time it's the only lens that I bring out with my camera whenever I go out to shoot B-roll, but this lens is tack sharp, even at f1.8. I mean, right now I'm using face tracking, I'm outside, I mean, you can see that background just completely lost in blur, but I am nice and in focus. And using this lens for people shots or product shots is absolutely incredible just because of that aperture. It just completely isolates the subject, pretty much forcing your attention to whatever it's focused on. Because I mean, if you try to look anywhere else, I mean, just look behind me. I mean, it does help that it's snowing quite a bit, but at the same time, that background's just completely lost in blur. But the colors coming out of this lens are incredible. I mean, as I said, it was shot in CineStyle, color grade, and Final Cut Pro. I do have plenty of shots with Canon's default color profile. I actually made a whole video talking about how great Canon's colors are, and for most of that video, it was shot on this lens. I did throw in some 50mm and 10 to 18 action in there, but other than that, it was strictly this lens. So overall, this is an absolutely fantastic lens, but what are some negatives about it? It's really hard to think of something that's wrong with this lens. I mean, if I had to say something, it would definitely be the noisy autofocusing system. Even with a shotgun mic on the camera, it's still definitely noticeable. It's still there, and there's no image stabilization, so if I walk around here, every little camera shake that the camera makes, it's gonna be very noticeable on this lens because there's no stabilization helping it. So that kind of does suck, but it's one of the things you kind of just have to deal with. If anything, it'll just help teach you the importance of keeping your camera steady. It'll help with keeping your hand steady, so when you do go to an image stabilized lens, the footage will just be a lot smoother. Another big drawback is the size of weight. I mean, it's not really easy to balance on a gimbal. I mean, my gimbal, the problem is the camera body itself is so light, so it's not enough to offset the weight of the lens, but you will you'll need a bigger, more expensive gimbal to balance a lens like this because of its weight. But one other thing that's really nice about it is that the zooming is internal. It doesn't protrude out of the lens, it just stays inside. So that means if you are on a gimbal and you zoom in and out, it won't mess up the balance. There's also a very tiny risk of particles getting in there and jamming up the lens when you're zooming. So overall, as I said multiple times, definitely a fantastic lens. If you can afford it and you want something in this range, then definitely go for it. That aperture is amazing, the performance of it is amazing, and there's not much out there like it in this footprint. I mean, you have the full frame lenses, but they're even bigger and even more expensive, but this one's only $700 and this is what you get for it. Definitely a great investment for a first lens. This was the first expensive lens I ever bought, and I can say from all the videos I shot with it, it definitely performs as expected, if not a little bit better for that price tag. But that's it for me, guys. I will link this lens down below, so if you want to go check it out and buy one for yourself, definitely I would recommend it. But thank you all for watching. I will see you guys in the next video. Peace out.